Before I begin today's sermon, I want to state that I'm going to be using the word queer throughout. I personally identify as queer because I don't really fit comfortably into the L or the B of the LGBTQ+. I fit comfortably into the plus. And for those of us who are further out in the acronym, queer can often feel like a more inclusive term. I personally first encountered it taking a women's focused queer studies class in college. However, I know that that term can be off-putting to some older gay folks who don't want to reclaim the word, and I want to preface this with this is coming from a place that I personally identify, and it is not meant in a slur or a negative way, and I just want to give you space for that if it's hard. So with that, today's sermon. Sometime last year, I heard the story of La Paloma for the first time. And I had one of those moments where the hair on the back of my neck stood up and my whole body tingled, and I knew that I wanted to tell this story, that I needed to tell this story. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a playwright. Not only am I a playwright, I'm a very what I would call woo writer. So what do I mean by that? I think that the stories that I tell should come to me. I let my characters tell me where they want to go, and I allow myself to be the conduit for the story. When the writing is going well, it often feels like the writing is happening through me, not by me. I've spoken about this in the pulpit before, but writing is a spiritual practice. It is a place of transcendent mystery and wonder. When the words of people flow through me, I get into a state of flow. Nothing feels more natural and real. It's bizarre to say this as a writer, but I don't really have words to describe this feeling. And right now, I'm co-writing something with a very methodical, outline, plot-driven writer, and holy cats, has that been an interesting, creative, and spiritual challenge for the both of us. I think I'm a better writer because I'm working with someone who's structure-oriented, but my impulse is to let the structure of the story reveal itself to me. So when I first read Julian Capo's article, I knew that La Paloma was a story I needed to tell. Because these people of Miami of 1937, these people are my people. The homosexuals in evening gowns, the trousered lesbians, and the prostitutes. Now, I'm not a homosexual in an evening gown, nor a prostitute, and nor am I currently trousered. But I know a queer community when I read about it, and I love that La Paloma was a place for every letter in the alphabet mafia, even if a lot of those letters weren't even named at the time. But that isn't the only reason why I knew I wanted to tell this story, that I needed to tell this story. Because unlike Stonewall, it isn't the story of fighting back in the moment that makes La Paloma fascinating. It's that they were resilient. 2 weeks after the Klan raided it, they had a drag show about it. A drag show, come on, that's awesome. It's just a story that hit me down to my bones, and I knew I had to be the one to tell it. And now I'm telling it multiple times. I'm telling a portion of the La Paloma story and Where or When, the audio drama that I've co-written with David J. Lohr, which will actually premiere here next weekend, and then be available as a podcast through the Incomparable Podcast Network. Where or When is primarily a time travel love story with a bisexual protagonist, but a big portion of it actually happens at La Paloma. And then this past August, I won a national commission from Theater Lab to write a play entirely about La Paloma. It's for their Fair Play initiative, which is to tell LGBTQ stories with a focus on history. I was one of 6 finalists for the commission, and I know that this story and my need to tell it was partially what pushed me over the top. Sometimes, when you need to tell a story, the universe gives you a way to be the person to tell the story. And I know I just made some of the humanists cringe, but remember, woo playwright. So what makes La Paloma different from Stonewall or any other number of gay raids that happened before or after? And what are the lessons we can take from it? So first, let me paint the picture for you. It's November 1937. The Spanish Civil War is in full swing. The Nazis are in power. We're a year after the Nazi Olympics and almost a year before Kristallnacht. Fascism is clearly on the rise everywhere, though we're still a few years away from the start of World War II. Miami at the time is growing. It's trying to become a tourism destination since the repeal of Prohibition, specifically looking at creating itself as an alternative destination to Havana. But as with any major period of growth, there's upheaval. There's a general fear among conservatives in Miami that Miami is becoming a place for indecency. You know that spring breaker discussion that comes up every year at the Miami Beach City Hall? This is just the same thing, but in a sepia tone. These people don't belong here, and they're drinking, and they're being reckless and nuisances, and why can't we just have nice tourists? And then, in the middle of all of that, you have La Paloma, a gay nightclub in then unincorporated Dade County. It's run by Al Youst, who is a colorful character with a sordid past. He has an extensive arrest record in New Jersey and was released from jail on the condition that he not return to Atlantic City. The judge told him to go away, go a long way away, go to someplace like Florida. So he went to Florida, and he opened a gay nightclub. And you know, a large chunk of Miami felt about La Paloma the same way New Jersey felt about Youst. A side note, Youst is a fascinating person, but not a good person. I know I'm kind of making him out to be a folk hero in this telling, but not the case. It's beyond the scope of the sermon, but his arrest record is not pretty. And just because you create a place of queer community doesn't mean you aren't also profiting off that queer community in some less than lovely ways. So in the years leading up to the raid, La Paloma's neighbors consistently complain that the club is a menace, indecent, a threat to public health. They even staged a demonstration in 1935, 2 years before the Klan raid. Which brings us to the Klan of Miami in the 1930s. While Klan membership peaks about a decade earlier in the country, it is still very active in the 1930s. In 1935, actually, there was a union organizer who was flogged and beaten to death in Tampa. Joseph Shoemaker. And so like the Klan is still very terrorist organization as they are today, but like they were still very active. In fact, it's the rise of the Klan in the 30s that was the reason we are here today. This very congregation was formed out of a desire to sort of fight the Klan and fascism. A local rabbi said at the time that he felt safer in a community with a Unitarian church, because that meant the city would be less prone to racial hatreds. We're here this morning, not just because I am super excited about this story and want to share it with all of you, but because this very group of people exist as a community to fight because they wanted to fight the Klan in the 30s. Like, this history is our history. So back to November 15th, 1937. On the night of the raid, the Klan held an induction ceremony at a local golf course with, the burning cross, because it's the Klan, and they marched to the club with the intent to shut it down. It was the first night ride that the Klan had done in Miami for over a decade. It doesn't go exactly as they had planned. When they rushed the club, the band played on, thinking it was part of the act. Eventually, the violence breaks out and it descends into chaos, with the Klan chasing everyone out and breaking furniture and instruments. Some of the performers and staff are injured, but nobody dies. However, the raid makes the national news at the time. The New York Times commented, "Every civic club in the Miami area is sure to approve the Klan's militant stand against the too rough divestment that has characterized the city's nightlife since 1934. The Dade County Sheriff also approved of the Klan's actions and ordered that La Paloma remain closed. And then here is my favorite part of the story. La Paloma reopens with spicier entertainment than ever, including a satire of the raid itself with drag performers pretending to be Klansmen. That's the story that I'm drawn to. The story that I'm going to flesh out in multiple pieces of writing. A story that I love so much that I don't just want to tell you about it once in a sermon, but I'm devoting the next few years of my professional life to telling it. Some of you might get it. The hair on the back of your neck might also be raised up, and you might feel energized by that story. And others of you might wonder why I feel the need to tell this story multiple times in fiction and in the service. Part of it is that the Miami of 1937 looks a lot like the Miami today, right down to the surprisingly conservative opinion piece for the New York Times. I recently joked that I finally came out at a time of acceptance of I recently joked that I finally came out at a time when it seems like the acceptance of queer folks is slowly fading away. Just this past week, our Reverend Tom Capo went to the Miami-Dade County School Board meeting to speak in support of observing LGBTQ History Month. At the same meeting, adults booed and threatened students who spoke out in support of observing LGBTQ History Month. Florida has become a flashpoint for a nationwide backlash against queer people. We have the Don't Say Gay law, which influenced the vote against 12th graders observing LGBTQ History Month, even though the law itself is only supposed to apply to 1st through 3rd grade. Our governor, Ron DeSantis, specifically filed a complaint against Our House, a drag bar in Wynwood. And Florida lawmakers have been consistently charging queer folks with grooming children. The rhetoric might have changed. I'm sure they didn't use the phrase grooming in 1937, but the complaints are the same. And that doesn't even get into the larger rise of fascism that we've seen internationally over the past 6 to 7 years. It's the combination of the two, homophobia and the rising fascism, that makes now feel a lot like 1937. As a teacher of playwriting, I often say to my students that historical fiction is about the present. Why do we tell those stories about the past right now? Because we're living right now. The most clear-cut example of this I can give is The Crucible. The Crucible is ostensibly about the Salem witch trials, but is also about McCarthyism. But that's true about any piece of historical fiction. So yes, that is part of the reason why I'm drawn to the story of La Paloma, because history then feels like it's happening today. But that isn't the only reason. I also love that La Paloma was a place where people of all parts of the gay community banded together. I've been in the process of coming out for the past decade. And part of that is that I didn't have that born this way certainty that a lot of my peers had, where they knew they were gay from childhood. Rather, straightness was an off-the-rack dress that fit very poorly. If I just worked harder at it, maybe lost weight or got some tailoring, I could make that dress fit. It's been a slow process of growing self-awareness that the dress would never fit. I was not straight. And part of that awareness came from being in community with other queer people, people who realize that cisgenderness is an off-the-rack dress that won't fit them, people who challenge gender norms but still don't fit into a cisgender dress. I might be overdoing this dress metaphor. But being among gay, trans, non-binary, bisexual, and lesbian folks gave me the courage to realize that I was one of them. I didn't have to fit a mold of butch or femme. I mean, my aesthetic is Miss Frizzle, like unicorn dress, Miss Frizzle. Side note, I am living my best life with this. I could be fully who I am and have a dress made for me, who I am. Yeah, y'all, I am definitely overdoing this dress metaphor. But La Paloma was a place for queer community. It wasn't just a gay club. It was a place where homosexuals in evening gowns, trousered lesbians, and prostitutes hung out together. There's such power in the people who lack power coming together and creating their own spaces. But that isn't the only reason I'm drawn to this forgotten piece of Miami history. I love this story because it isn't just about fighting back, it's about fighting back through art. 2 weeks after the raid, La Paloma opens with a satire version of the raid. Not only do they not allow their oppressors to intimidate them into silence, they come back with a drag show! A drag show of them wearing Klan robes! Like, that's resilience! Woody Guthrie painted the phrase, "This machine kills fascists," on his guitar in the 1940s. Like, we talk about art being restorative, we can talk about art saving lives, but art also kills fascists. And while the folks at La Paloma were a few years ahead of Guthrie, I'd say they would agree with Woody too. Art can be social justice. Art can be resistance. Art can be community. I don't even know if that satire show was about the raid was good or not. I don't even really care. Because what it represents is so much more important than what it was. That bit of satire, that drag show of them sort of mocking their oppressors, that says, we're here, we're queer, get used to it. That says, you can't bully us back into the closet. That says, we are in charge of our own story and we will not live the story you have written for us. It's an attitude that says, I am tired of things happening to me. I'm going to start happening to things. And that's the vibe. That's the energy. That's the feel of La Paloma. It isn't just about fighting back. Stonewall was a riot, and we fought back. We faced our oppressors head on and said no more. At La Paloma, we said that we are the storytellers of our own stories, and we will not be frightened. I fell in love with that, and I hope you have too.